My name is Eliza. I'm 21 years old. I live in a quiet neighborhood where the days look ordinary, and the nights seem silent, but inside me lives a storm that nobody can see. From the outside, people think I'm a simple girl, studying, walking to the library, smiling politely at my neighbors, and living a routine life. But deep inside, there's something I've never spoken about. Something that feels too fragile to bring into words. It's my untold fantasy. I don't even know when it began. Maybe it was born years ago. Maybe it slipped into my mind without permission. Or maybe it was always hiding inside me, waiting for me to notice. When I was younger, I thought fantasies were things people kept locked in books or in movies. Something distant and unreal. But as I grew older, I realized fantasies are not just daydreams. They are doors to the deepest part of ourselves. And my fantasy, oh, it was different. It wasn't about castles or riches or fairy tales. It was about emotions, closeness, touch, and a connection so real that sometimes my heart ached for it. I never dared to tell anyone. How could I? Society doesn't understand a girl's secret dreams. They would laugh or judge, or twist it into something ugly. So, I kept it buried, locked away like a diary without words, a treasure that was mine alone. And yet, every time I closed my eyes at night, my fantasy painted scenes on the canvas of my mind. It wasn't about someone famous or someone unreal. It was always faceless. Just the feeling mattered. A presence beside me when the world felt empty. A voice that whispered I wasn't alone. A hand that reached for mine when silence grew too heavy. My fantasy was about intimacy. Not in the way people gossip about it, but in the way a soul longs for another soul. Sometimes it scared me. Why do I feel so much? Why do these silent longings follow me like shadows? Other times it made me feel alive, as if even in my ordinary life, I carried a secret world nobody else had access to. I remember one particular evening, rain tapping gently on my window, my lamp glowing with soft light, and me sitting at my desk with an open book that I couldn't focus on. My mind was elsewhere. My heart was racing with images of the fantasy I never admitted out loud. It was like a story playing only for me, a movie hidden behind my eyelids. And in that story, I wasn't Eliza, the quiet student from the neighborhood. I was someone braver, freer, and more open to the kind of love that didn't need to be explained. But then reality would return. My mother calling me from the kitchen, my phone buzzing with a friend's message, my assignments waiting to be completed. And I would shut the door of that inner world, locking away my fantasy once again. Still I wondered, why do we create these private worlds? Are they just illusions, or do they tell us something important about who we are? My fantasy wasn't just about romance. It was about freedom. It was about letting myself feel without shame, without fear. And maybe that was why I never told anyone. I was afraid they would take my freedom away, reduce my fantasy into something small, when to me, it felt vast like the sky. One day, I tried writing it down. I thought maybe if I gave it words, I would understand it better. But the pen shook in my hand, and after a few lines, I tore the page apart. No, I thought, this is mine. Too personal. Too sacred. Some things aren't meant to be spoken. Or so I believed at that time. But the fantasy never stopped visiting me. In classrooms, when the lecture grew boring, I would drift into it. In libraries surrounded by silence, I would feel its presence. On walks, when the evening breeze touched my hair, I would think of the closeness I longed for. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up with my heart racing as if my fantasy had walked into my dreams. I often wondered, am I strange? Do other girls have such secrets too? Do they carry hidden worlds inside their hearts that they never show? Or am I the only one trapped between what I feel and what I can say? One evening, my friend Julia stayed over. We were lying in my room, laughing about silly things, talking about school, life, and plans. And then she suddenly asked, "Eliza, do you ever dream about something you can't tell anyone?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Was she reading my mind? I laughed nervously and said, "Maybe sometimes." "Why?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I just feel like everyone has something hidden." That night I couldn't sleep. Her words echoed inside me. Everyone has something hidden. Was my fantasy not as strange as I thought? Maybe it was human to carry secrets. Maybe it was natural to have untold desires that live quietly within us. And yet, mine felt so heavy, so overwhelming, like a wave I couldn't control. I knew one day I would have to face it, not just in my imagination but in real life. Because fantasies, when they are strong enough, don't stay silent forever. They find ways to speak, to rise, to demand attention. That was the beginning of my journey. The realization that my untold fantasy wasn't just a passing thought, but a mirror reflecting something deeper about me. Something I would one day have to explore, to understand, and maybe, just maybe, to share with someone I could trust. But at that time, I didn't know how, or when, or with whom. All I knew was this. I had a secret, and it was growing stronger each day. And little did I know, the moment that would push me closer to revealing it was already waiting just around the corner. The days kept moving, but inside me, something was shifting. I could feel it, like a silent whisper urging me to no longer hide. My fantasy was no longer just a secret dream. It had become a part of who I was. And no matter how much I tried to bury it, it kept resurfacing, stronger, louder, more alive. One evening, I walked alone through the city streets. The lamps glowed softly. The wind carried the scent of flowers from a nearby shop, and the world seemed peaceful. Yet inside I felt restless. I kept thinking, when will I stop pretending? When will I finally allow myself to be honest with someone? Maybe even with myself. That night, I returned home, shut the door to my room, and stared at the mirror. My reflection looked back at me, but I didn't see just Eliza. I saw a girl with secrets too heavy for her heart. I whispered to myself, "Why are you so afraid? Why can't you say it? Why do you think the world will break if you do?" My reflection had no answer, but my heart did. It was fear. Fear of being judged, misunderstood, or laughed at. Still, something inside me wanted change. And destiny, as if it had been listening, soon brought me the moment I had been waiting for without knowing. It happened one late afternoon at the library. I was sitting with books around me, pretending to study, when my friend Daniel walked in. He wasn't just any friend. He was someone I trusted, someone gentle, someone who never mocked or dismissed emotions. He sat beside me and smiled. You look like your mind is far away, Eliza. I laughed nervously. Maybe it is. He tilted his head, curious. Where does it go when you disappear like that? My heart skipped a beat. Did I dare to answer honestly? I wanted to brush it off with a joke, but instead words slipped out. It goes to a place I can't talk about. He didn't laugh. He didn't push. He just nodded slowly and said, Some places are too precious to describe. And that simple sentence broke something inside me. It was the first time someone had seen me without asking me to explain. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about his words. Too precious to describe. Was that what my fantasy was? Not strange, not wrong, but precious? The next few days, I found myself drawn to him. Not because he was part of my fantasy, but because he made me feel safe enough to admit it existed. Slowly, I began testing small truths with him. Talking about emotions, about how people hide parts of themselves, about how silence sometimes feels louder than words. He listened always, without judgment. And one evening, sitting under a tree near the park, the words I had kept locked away for so long spilled out. My voice trembled, but I spoke. Daniel, do you ever feel like there's a world inside you that nobody knows about? A secret so big, it almost scares you. He looked at me gently. Yes, I do. We all carry shadows and dreams no one sees. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. Mine, it's not about money or success. It's about closeness. It's about wanting someone to understand me without words, to be near me in ways I can't explain. It's about longing so deep that sometimes it feels like pain. That's my untold fantasy. Silence followed. My hands shook, my chest felt tight, but I had finally said it. For the first time in my life, I had given voice to what I thought would remain buried forever. Tears burned my eyes. Relief washed over me like a wave. All this time, I had thought my fantasy was a burden, something shameful. But here was someone telling me it was beautiful. From that day on, something changed. I still carried my fantasy, but no longer as a secret prison. It became a companion I wasn't afraid of. I realized fantasies don't always need to be fulfilled to matter. They just need to be understood, honored, and accepted as part of who we are. Weeks passed, and I noticed how my life felt lighter. I could laugh more freely, study with focus, and walk without the weight of silence pressing on me. Even my reflection in the mirror looked different, braver, calmer, more real. And one night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, "You're not broken, Eliza. You're human. And your untold fantasy is not a flaw. It's a window into your soul. I don't know where life will take me. Maybe one day, my fantasy will find a place in reality. Maybe it won't. But I do know this. I am no longer afraid of it. I no longer see it as a shadow, but as a light guiding me toward understanding myself. And that's my story. The story of how a silent dream became a voice, how a secret became freedom, and how I learned that the deepest fantasies are not about perfection, but about truth. Because in the end, we are all dreamers carrying untold stories, waiting for the moment we dare to whisper them into the world. And when we do, we realize we were never as alone as we thought.